folks, welcome back. So we're just going to do a sort of quick reflective episode today. We'll do these occasionally, sort of in between, looking back on interviews that I've done with experts in the non-profit sector, just to sort of talk about how the outcome of that conversation has maybe influenced our thinking a little bit. So in the last episode, I spoke to a guy called Ken Burnett on fundraising. And so the reason I wanted to do that episode was I sort of assumed that fundraising was going to be a sort of a fundamental part of our organisational activities. We just hadn't decided to what extent. And then if you've listened to that interview, I don't know if you get the same feeling listening to it as I got conducting it. I sort of felt like we were talking past each other a little bit, because basically I wanted to know from Ken how small organisations, small non-profits and start-up non-profits, how they can approach fundraising. That's relevant to us as a small organisation, as a start-up. But he basically said they can't. That to do it properly, it requires a big budget to get a decent return on investment. And I think, on reflection, I probably agree with him. But that's a bit of a problem for us. And so I just wanted to sort of ask you, Anna, what, a couple of things about what you thought on reflection to that conversation. But the first thing was, same as me, it was a bit airy-fairy for me where fundraising sat, how much of it we were going to do, to what extent we were going to rely on it. And we'd never discussed it either. So I'm just wondering to you, to what extent you considered fundraising a viable option for us, both now as a start-up and then maybe something at some point in the future as well.
I guess because we are acting as both as a charity and as a company, I did think that fundraising and, applying for grants and, looking for sources of funding that way was something that we will get involved with. And I guess, you're thinking that that's an advantage, that you could, get started, that you could start a project that way. But I guess after listening to the guy, it just kind of made you think, is this something that you can get involved with at this stage when we're this small, to actually put our efforts and resources and time into doing fundraising, which I guess there might come a point where we will be able to do that, but whether that's the time to do that now, I don't know. It doesn't feel right for us as a CIC to start with that and focus on that. And I guess we don't have the audience, we don't have the reputation, we don't have the manpower to focus on that. So for me personally, I think I really enjoyed listening to Ken. I really liked what he said, and there were some really important points that I've definitely taken on about the personal approach, about knowing your audience, about the way you communicate. And I thought those points are really, really good. And I guess not necessarily just for fundraising, but just going forward into doing projects, engaging with the community, and trying to help as much as give back. So I guess in that sense, that was really helpful to hear how you can engage with your audience that way. But I guess in terms of fundraising and trying to gain, some sort of form of for us to keep us going, to find funds to keep us going that way, I don't think that that's helping us at this moment in time where we're at.
So I mean,
I wouldn't write it off. I think there's a right moment and there's a time where you might be at that point. I don't know what you think.
Well, I mean, a couple of things here. Firstly, before I jump into all those, I just want to know if I've just said I've got no experience whatsoever with fundraising, but you've worked non-profits and charities in the past, and I'm just wondering if you've got any experience in it, whether you've done it or seen it done, and how well, or whether it's just it's been a waste of time. Because again, the charities you've worked with have been small to medium-sized charities, not these big organisations.
Yeah,
and whether it's served them well at all in your experience.
I think, like you've mentioned in the interview, when you think about fundraising, you think about a kind of side of things that, requires a lot of begging from people, trying to convince them, trying to sell them the idea that you're making a difference. And I think for a small organization, and from personal experience, it does feel like that, like you'd have to beg for money, that you have to convince people. And, there's happy cases where you get to speak to someone one-to-one, they catch the vision, they know what you're trying to do, they value your project and your idea, and they're willing to invest, they're willing to help you. But again, because, if you're a small organization, there's only so much money that they can offer. And that's so small that you can hardly do anything. So at the end of it, while your vision might be big, you might have big plans and you're thinking, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to grow it, I'm going to expand, I'm going to do it on a wider scale. When it starts as a seed, and you get someone to invest in that for a month, 6 months, and then that's it. After that, there's no one else to come and jump on it and say, I really like that, would like to fund you further on to continue that. So it kind of dies a slow death, where you had a good idea, you had a bit of money to run it, and then that was it. And then, it's just thinking, how can you keep that going? And as a small charity, to rely on that and rely on an income coming through fundraising, it's very difficult, and I wouldn't recommend it, because it's not sustainable and it's frustrating. It really is frustrating. Like you said, it gets it to that point where you lose the point. You don't want to do it because, no one's engaged, and you're losing the motivation. And then, with time being so precious, you're thinking, should I be investing my time somewhere else? And I think this is where it's key for us, because we act as a company as well. So, should you invest that time wisely? Should you be doing something else at this moment in time where where you're growing, where you're developing? And once you got to that stage where, you've got reputation, people recognize you, they know who you are, and they know the work that you do, they are willing to donate and be part of the vision and the journey, because they like what you're doing, because they believe in what you're doing. So in a way, it becomes natural for people to be interested and wanting to invest in that, as opposed to you begging and knocking at people's doors, which feels pointless at this point for us, really.
Yeah. Well, on that point as well, with that, that's the one thing. It's the main thing I took away from that conversation, was the idea of asking with a bit of pride, because that was a big thing for me. You sort of get the ick asking for, and not just for money, but just asking for help. Like, even when we've invited people to be sort of part of the academic advisory board for this project, I've always sort of felt a bit ugh. But after having that conversation, I've thought, no, you know what? We're doing something good here, and it's a non-profit, and we've got a decent mission that we believe in. And so, just even since that conversation, a couple of asks that I've put out with people since then have been a bit more confident. It's sort of like, it's not like, oh God, please come and help us. I almost feel like I'm offering you an opportunity to sort of come and engage with something that's worth doing. So that was very worthwhile. The thing, the main thing that sort of bothered me, and it's related to how we envisioned this organisation working, was the fact that even if this organisation gets big at some point, when it gets big. That wasn't very confident, was it? My confidence fell apart in about 10 seconds. Right, so when we get big, the fact that the foundation scales doesn't necessarily translate to the projects we get involved in. So the way we've sort of conceptualized this is we're most likely to be getting involved in sort of small scale, local, community-based research and projects, rather than we haven't got this one big mission statement. I mean, if it is, it's to try and improve mental health care, or just improve people's emotional well-being. But those things, for us, the sort of the philosophy that underpins the foundation is that we're not all about sort of therapy and medication and blah blah blah. For us, that's going to be fixing communities and fixing people's relationships with one another, and employment issues, and tackling poverty and things like that. And so the problem is, 5 years down the line, we're a big foundation, everybody knows about us, congratulations for us. But we're still going to be getting involved in these small local community-based projects. By virtue of that, it's sort of a two-sided coin, really, or double-edged sword, should I say. Is that on the one hand, because they're going to be small community-based projects, they're not going to require a massive budget of like millions to implement something. So by that metric, it's sort of easier to fulfill that funding need. It's working on a smaller budget. But because they're going to be local projects, that means you've got a very limited audience. Because if we want to sort of deal with some sort of social issue on a small council estate in Manchester, that's of no interest to somebody that lives in Scotland or London or Cornwall or Wales. They're not going to feel connected to that project. Yeah. So even if we've got a huge audience, it's not necessarily going to appeal to them. And so we're sort of back to square one with, even if we're a successful organisation as a whole, just by virtue of the fact that we're doing these local-based projects, I feel I'm just worried that we're going to keep running into the same thing over and over and over again with fundraising. And the thing I'm not keen on is, I mean, we're only a few months into doing this now, but I genuinely hate the grant seeking process. It's boring, it's time consuming, and it's the worst part about it is a lot of the grants, there's not necessarily a time scale to when you're going to get an answer, to when you're going to get given the money, and you know, you've got no idea whether you're going to actually get the money or not, and so there's that level of uncertainty there. And so to me, that just sort of leaves us with the one thing that we can rely on is to be a non-profit that's, well, a non-profit that seeks profit, a non-profit that has some sort of business model where we go out and offer products and services to people, and we make enough of a profit from that we can then go ahead and fund these smaller projects. But I just wonder I'm just sort of spitballing here, sort of imagining what the future might look like. And I'm just wondering what you think of that, whether there's any sort of way around it.
I think I personally feel, so like you said, obviously from our experience for the last few months, to try and secure some money and try and see if, you know, anyone's interested in what we're hoping to do and what we want to do, it's very hard to convince that through an application form. And I guess, you know, you lose momentum, you lose motivation. So I don't feel that's right for us. And I do feel like it suits us better to try and in a way just be self-sustainable and find a way to fund the projects that we want to run. But I wonder if longer term, when we do grow, you know, bigger, when we've got more going on, when we've got different projects happening, whether, you know, we'll be interested in gaining audience and people interested to sponsor our special projects or different, you know, opportunities or interventions in the community where people, you know, would want to in a way body with us to change the lives of whoever, you know, in whatever neighborhood or community we're working with. Because I do think there's power in people getting to know each other's stories and empathizing with one another and knowing what you've got but someone else hasn't. And, you know, we can be the bridge, the middle person to carry on that message and do the groundwork. And, you know, I wonder if longer down in the longer run, you know, sometime down the road, whether we would be interested in investing in that. And I think Ken really got me thinking about, you know, the importance of being personal and connecting with the audience and, you know, helping them to understand where their money goes and what's happening, what's the impact that they made, the difference that they make in people's lives. So I think, you know, if people, and I guess with where we're at here in England, where people often would have more than they need, you know, they would earn more than they would need for their basic needs. And, you know, one of the ways to look after your well-being, your mental health, is to give back, you know, to make a difference to someone, whether that is volunteering through your money, through your time, through your skills or abilities. You know, people are willing to contribute to that. So I guess because we are you know, a charity in a way, I'd like people to be able able to do that, to give something back. And, you know, whether that'll be monetary or more in times of, you know, people volunteering, I would like to rely on that at some point where there is space for that. Because I think it is fulfilling for the people doing it, but also for the people receiving it. So I wouldn't write it off completely, you know, because I think we can get quite focused and say, you know, if we do something that works and is business related and business focused, and that, you know, we don't bother with the stuff that takes, you know, longer, that is time consuming, that is draining. You know, we should focus on what's working. But I think because at our core, who we are and what we're doing, it is about serving the community and the less fortunate and the ones that couldn't afford. I think that will be quite nice to try and incorporate that in the projects further down the road. But we'll just have to see at the right time when that comes, how we can incorporate that.
Yeah, I'm just to give people an idea as well, to anyone that's watching this that hasn't engaged in sort of a grant application.
Don't spoil it for them, Danny. Don't.
No, what I mean, have you done any grant writing from sort of start to finish where you've taken care of the whole application?
Yeah.
What's the longest?
Not massive ones.
Oh, you have.
Not massive ones.
What's the longest ones you've done then?
Oh, you go back and forward. So I'd say weeks and months. So there's not one that you could do in a day. It's not even a short one. You'll have to pull details, information together, check it with your person in charge, whoever, then find out where you're sending it, how you're submitting it. It's such a horrendous process. It's just hideous. It really is. And I guess that's something that we can advocate for. Make it easier for companies and charities and CICs to apply for money. If you really have got money out there that you want to donate, make it easier and simple for people to be able to communicate their ideas and projects. And then if you think it's worth it or whatever,
I think I've done some bid writing for people, and I've submitted invoices for between 30 to 40 hours just to complete one application. 40 hours, and all the research that goes into it. Like you're looking up your clinical research to back up your arguments, and you've got to be able to sell, and there's paragraphs and paragraphs of writing. Then you've got to reformat PDFs and get old documents and update them for this new application, and it's horrendous. We've toyed with the idea. I love this idea. One day that if as a foundation we can at some point set aside a budget or get some money from the government for us to apportion out to people, and that would be, if we're ever giving money out to people, that's going to be top of my agenda, is making the application process for people not boring, but actually fun. I want people to actually enjoy the process, and so that even if they don't earn the money, they haven't slogged the guts out and wasted a load of money on bid writers, because it's awful. But the thing you mentioned then with this is a bit where I thought me and Ken were sort of talking past each other a bit, was when I was talking to him about doing what we're doing now, where we use these free platforms, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, as a way of sort of reaching out to people and building up an audience, sort of telling our story, and as a way of getting people to engage with that. And he didn't seem... Ken seems like a traditional media person. And he didn't seem very sort of impressed with using social media. He said, likes aren't worth very much. You can't take likes to the bank, which is sort of fair enough. But then I was sort of thinking that you mentioned then about bridging the gap. I was wondering whether this medium sort of does that. So when I've said someone in Cornwall isn't going to care less what's going on about a project on a council estate in Manchester, but if they see us there, they see us meeting the people, they see the process being documented, and they see the people almost face to face on a screen, then people can maybe become invested in it, and that's maybe a way for us to close that gap. But then another way that I think it was sort of a mistake as well to just sort of focus primarily on the idea of people whipping the credit card out and putting money in the bank. Like you've just said, there's other ways that this sort of reaches out to people, that people might see the story that we're telling and say, I'd want to get involved in that. you know, whether that's as a volunteer or as fundraising. I mean, just, you know, through doing this now, we've managed to get somebody on the academic advisory board who's a professor from Canada. And that's just him. He's that episode will be coming out in about a week or so, doing an interview with him. But that's just from him seeing what we're doing and looking at the few videos we've already got online and saying, I like what those guys are doing and I want to be involved. And so
that's great.
Yeah. Do you think the same that maybe he was sort of undervaluing this, that we're
I guess it might come down to obviously his experience as well, and he is a very knowledgeable and experienced gentleman who's done this for years and years. And I guess what he found works was the traditional ways of reaching out to people, and I completely understand it, and I can see how that makes sense. But I guess for us who are slightly younger, and we grew up in the kind of this social media age, we know what it's like to connect with people. We, you know, our lives are lived on social media. You know, that's how we get in touch with each other. That's how we talk about everyday things. And, you know, that's how we do life. So I guess it makes sense to appeal to people that way, to connect to people that way. And for us, I guess, in terms of, you know, research and getting expertise and knowledge from different areas and parts of the world, you know, I love that easiness and availability to do that with anyone who's interested and reach out to people. And, you know, through, you know, traditional channels, having to fly out to someone to meet them, or having to write them a letter, or having to, you know, drive down to a meeting or get the train there to meet them. It's not so practical as getting on a Zoom meeting or ringing them. And I do feel there's a value in the age that we're living at the moment to connect through social media so easily. And I know he mentioned about the younger generation, you know, they might be interested, they might be, you know, excited about what you're doing, but they can't afford to pay. I think, you know, we kind of underestimate that, because young people do start employment at 16, and, you know, you might be getting a good wage at, I don't know, 26, 27, 28, 30, whatever. And I think that people who, you know, have been brought up in a culture where you have to make, you know, do your bit, you have to contribute towards something, towards charity, to donate, to, you know, would be interested to give something now, whether it's £1, £2, £5. It's not a lot for a young person in their 20s, early 30s, but it would be making a difference for us, for a small or mid, you know, charity that I've just started. If someone's interested in the project, and like you said, we're not necessarily after the money, you know, if you're looking for manpower, for volunteers, for young people who are excited and have got skills, you know, we've got degrees in education to contribute to what we're offering, you know, that's more important than money anyway. So I guess from our perspective, it's important to know who we're targeting and what we actually want, because I think from what he was talking about, the traditional channels of reaching out to people and kind of getting them to write you a check, or, you know, reaching to their pocket, it was slightly different than what we're hoping to do and what we're doing with the William Tuke Foundation. So I think, you know, there's loads to learn from what he's mentioned, but I would also say, let's take risks, you know, let's connect and let's reach as far as we can. And I guess if anyone's listening to this and they're interested to contribute and give us a hand with anything that we're doing, you know, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. That's what we're about. You know, we want to connect people. We want to use people's skills and abilities in what we do to make our communities and, you know, what we do to improve the lives of the people affected by mental health and other social issues that we've talked about. So, yeah, I'd like to see the ripple effect of, you know, the little podcast, the little entries, you know, the educational stuff that goes on there, anything that we put on there, how it reaches people, potentially and intentionally, you know. We probably don't know how far it will go or what kind of people it will reach. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, you know, just speaking from experience, it was doing a podcast that sort of changed the direction of my life, and ended with me getting involved in all sorts of projects that I would have never even dreamed of. So I've definitely got faith in it, in just putting out content and reaching people that way. Yeah. I wouldn't bother wasting time doing it if I didn't have faith in it. But just sort of bringing this to a close now. taking all this into consideration, I'm sort of conceptualizing this now that it's almost like moving forwards as we're coming out of lockdown from coronavirus, and we're going to hopefully soon be able to start getting back out there into the world and networking and actually, making arrangements for getting involved in projects. I'm guessing that our attention should maybe be something like 90% on generating revenue, on offering some sort of products and services that are going to bring money into the foundation that can then be spread out or apportioned to whatever projects we want to get involved in. And that, again, that's the big thing for me is, again, with the grant seeking, they're all very sort of, they exist within very sort of narrow parameters, within government guidelines, within nice guidelines, within shoring up this fetish that everyone's got with CBT and therapy. And there's very little freedom involved in it. There's not very much scope for projects that are outside of the bounds of it. Whenever I sit down and read these grant proposals, it's very rare, I feel, that anybody's seeking any sort of genuine innovation. And and I think the only way for us to go about doing that is to have our own money, and then we can do whatever we want with it. And then I'm guessing grant seeking is something that we sort of do it on the side. It's a bit like throwing mud at the wall, seeing what sticks. Something comes along, seems like an opportunity, we'll have a crack at it. And just sort of do it in the evenings and weekends when we can be bothered getting round to it. And then as far as fundraising is concerned at the moment, I'm going to stick a donate button up on the website, just because I've had some people already email me from the old podcast, because I've told the old audience about this new project, and a few of them have said, "Oh, it sounds amazing. I want to donate a bit of money or whatever." And so I am going to stick a donate button up, and it's it might only bring in a couple of £100 for the entire year, but it's better than a kick up the arse. And at the moment we sort of need every penny we can get our hands on. But I think more important than money is just people's enthusiasm and people wanting to get involved, I guess. So I don't know, do you agree with that as a general as a general pie chart idea? Yeah. Right, so we'll leave it there. But the only thing that means now is, if we're going to focus around about 90% of our efforts on trying to come up with viable business solutions so that we can fund our own projects and do whatever we want and have a bit of freedom, is I've got a bit of business experience, but I know how to go out and make a bit of money for my own sake, but to do it in the non-profit sector is a different animal, I'm guessing. So I'm going to try and make the episode after this one, I'm going to go out, I'm going to try and find somebody who specialises in making a surplus or making a profit in the non-profit sector, applying business principles to a non-profit, and then seeing what we can learn from them. So that'll be the next episode, I think.
Excellent. I think that sounds like a good idea. I think that's where we're up to. That's where we're heading to. So,
right, there we go. So, we'll leave it there. No need to stand on ceremony. I'll crack on and try and make arrangements for that interview, and look out for that.
Sounds good.
Next episode on the Non-Profit Diaries. We'll see you again next time.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dan.